After my surgery, my daughter-in-law shouted, "Stop being dramatic and cook, you old hag," in front of the entire family. I silently obeyed. That weekend, when they arrived, they found a note on the door. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." The pain in my chest wasn't just from the triple bypass surgery anymore. It was from something deeper, something that cut through muscle and bone and pierced straight to my soul. "For God's sake, Deborah, stop being dramatic and cook, you old hag." Sophia's words rang through the dining room, silencing everyone. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. Just 3 weeks after open heart surgery, and here I was, being ordered to prepare dinner like nothing had happened. I looked up, hoping to catch my son's eye, but James was staring intently at his empty plate, his jaw clenched. No defense, no intervention, just silence. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "The doctor said I should take it easy. For at least 6 weeks." Sophia rolled her eyes dramatically. "We've all heard enough about your surgery. James works 60 hours a week and I've been handling the kids alone. We came here for a nice dinner, not to hear more complaints." I looked around the table at my grandchildren, Emma and Tyler, ages 10 and 8, their eyes wide with discomfort. My brother Robert and his wife Patricia sat frozen, exchanging uncomfortable glances. This was supposed to be a small celebration of my recovery, but it had turned into another opportunity for Sophia to put me in my place. With effort that sent shooting pain across my chest, I pushed myself up from the chair. "I'll get dinner started," I said, shuffling toward the kitchen. As I passed behind James, I placed my hand lightly on his shoulder. He flinched slightly, but didn't look up. My son, my only child, the little boy who once brought me dandelions and told me I was his best friend, couldn't even meet my eyes. In the kitchen, I moved slowly, gathering ingredients for a simple pasta dish. My hand shook as I filled a pot with water. The surgical scar on my chest burned with every movement. The doctor had been clear. No lifting, no exertion, plenty of rest. But what choice did I have? "Need any help in here?" Robert appeared in the doorway, his face etched with concern. "I'm fine," I lied, the automatic response I'd perfected over years of making myself smaller, less troublesome, less visible. "Debbie, that was completely out of line. You should be resting, not cooking for that." "Please, Robert," I cut him off, glancing nervously toward the dining room. "Let's not make things worse," he sighed, grabbing a cutting board. "You can't keep letting them treat you this way." I focused on chopping garlic, each press of the knife deliberate. "He's my son." "What would you have me do?" "Stand up for yourself, for starters," Robert muttered, but he didn't push further. He knew as well as I did the complicated dance of family dynamics, the fear of losing what little connection I still had with James and my grandchildren. We worked in silence for a few minutes before Sophia appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Just a simple dinner, Deborah. No need for Robert to help. I'm sure you've cooked pasta thousands of times." Her smile was sweet, her eyes cold. "James is asking. For you, Robert. Something about the game last night?" Robert hesitated, looking at me. "Go ahead," I said quietly. "I've got this." After he left, Sophia lingered, watching me struggle to lift the pot of water onto the stove. She made no move to help. "You know," she said conversationally, "James was really hoping for your lasagna. The kids have been talking about it all week." My heart sank. Lasagna meant bending to retrieve heavy pans from low cabinets, extended time standing, lifting a substantial dish in and out of the oven. It might as well have been a marathon in my condition. "I don't think I can—" "Of course you can," Sophia interrupted. "Unless you want to disappoint the children. Again." The accusation hung in the air between us. My throat tightened. Disappointing my grandchildren was a recurring theme in Sophia's subtle psychological warfare. Each time I couldn't attend a school, function, or missed a soccer game due to my health issues, she made sure I felt the full weight of my failure. "I'll make the lasagna," I whispered. Sophia smiled triumphantly. "Good. I knew you could push through all this drama." As she turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the window above the sink. When had I become this person? This shadow of myself who couldn't even protect her own healing body from the demands of a cruel daughter-in-law? The pasta water began to boil, bubbling up like the tears I refused to let fall. I thought of the cardiologist's stern warning just days ago. "Your heart has been through a trauma, Deborah. It needs time to heal. You need to prioritize your recovery." But as I bent painfully to retrieve the lasagna pan, I realized that my heart had been through much more than just surgical trauma. Years of subtle cruelty, of diminishment, of watching my son become someone I barely recognized. That was the deeper wound. And for the first time in 7 years, standing alone in that kitchen with pain radiating through my chest, I wondered if this wound could ever heal as long as I remained trapped in this role I'd been assigned. The role of the convenient grandmother, the unpaid cook and cleaner, the woman whose feelings and health were inconveniences to be overcome. Something had to change. And as I layered noodles and sauce with trembling hands, I made a decision that would alter everything. I couldn't sleep that night. The pain medication should have knocked me out, but my mind kept replaying Sophia's words over and over. "Stop being dramatic and cook, you old hag." I'd been called many things in my 69 years. Stubborn, opinionated, even difficult at times, but never a hag. Never with such casual cruelty in front of people who supposedly loved me. At 3 a.m., I carefully shifted positions in bed, wincing as my healing chest protested. In the quiet darkness, I finally allowed myself to face what I'd been avoiding for years. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was simply the most public example of a pattern that had been established the moment Sophia entered our lives. I remembered the first time I noticed something was off. James had brought Sophia home to meet me about 8 years ago. I'd prepared his favorite meal, pot roast with rosemary potatoes. As I served dinner, Sophia had leaned over to James and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "You didn't tell me your mom was such a traditional housewife type." The comment was delivered with a smile, but her eyes had remained cold. James had laughed uncomfortably. "Mom's cooking is worth it. Trust me." I'd brushed it off then. A small thing. But it was just the beginning. After they married, the comments became more frequent, more pointed. When I brought homemade cookies to their new house, "Oh, store-bought would have been fine, Deborah. No need to go to all that trouble at your age." When I offered to babysit, "We have a professional nanny. The children need structure, not grandmotherly indulgence." Each barb delivered with a smile, each one diminishing me a little more. But it wasn't just Sophia. What hurt more was watching James transform from my loving, considerate son into someone who stood by silently as his wife chipped away at his mother's dignity. I thought about the James of before, the boy who'd call me from college just to tell me about his day, who'd defended me fiercely when his father left us for his 20-something secretary. "It's just you and me now, Mom," he'd said then, his arm around my shoulders. "We'll take care of each other." When had that boy disappeared? When had he become this man who couldn't even look me in the eye as his wife called me a hag? I reached for my phone on the nightstand and pulled up the photos from last Christmas. There I was at the edge of every family picture, slightly blurred, as if I were already fading away. In one image, I was in the kitchen, of course, while everyone else posed in their matching pajamas by the tree. In another, I was half cut off, barely in frame as Sophia took center stage, directing the entire event like a movie she was starring in. I scrolled back further to photos from before Sophia. There was James with his arm around me at his graduate school graduation, both of us beaming, both fully in the frame. Something had changed, and it wasn't just Sophia's influence. James had allowed this to happen, had participated in it even, with his silence and his absence. I thought about all the times I'd swallowed my hurt feelings, when they forgot to invite me to Emma's ballet recital, when they planned a family vacation and informed me about it only after they returned. When James stopped calling except to ask if I could watch the kids on short notice or prepare food for some event. I'd become a utility, not a mother. A convenience, not a person with feelings and needs of her own. The surgery had forced me to face my own mortality. Lying in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines, I'd had plenty of time to think about the life I'd been living. The doctor had been blunt. "Your heart is wearing out faster than it should, Deborah. The stress in your life isn't helping." Stress. Like the stress of walking on eggshells in my own home. The stress of never knowing when the next cutting remark would come. The stress of watching my son drift away, unable to stop it. I carefully sat up, switching on the bedside lamp. My chest ached, both from the surgical wound and from the realization that was crystallizing with painful clarity. I had become a servant in my own family. How had it happened so gradually that I barely noticed? After Richard left me for his young receptionist 20 years ago, I'd thrown myself into being the perfect mother to James. I'd worked 2 jobs to put him through college, postponed my own dreams, sacrificed everything to give him a good life. Perhaps that was part of the problem. I'd centered my entire existence around my son, and when he married Sophia, I desperately tried to maintain that connection by making myself useful, by being available whenever they needed me, on their terms, by accepting scraps of inclusion, instead of demanding respect. I thought about yesterday's dinner. After I'd served the lasagna, I had no business making in my condition. How Sophia had criticized the amount of garlic, how James had remained silent, how the children had eaten quickly and asked to be excused to play video games, how Robert and Patricia had exchanged glances throughout the meal, their discomfort palpable. After everyone left, I'd stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes, my surgical scar throbbing, and I'd felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Anger. Not just at Sophia, though her cruelty was the most obvious target. Not just at James, though his betrayal cut deepest. But at myself, for allowing this situation to continue for so long. For accepting the unacceptable out of fear of losing what little connection I still had to my son and grandchildren. I carefully got out of bed and moved to the window, looking out at the quiet pre-dawn neighborhood. In the house across the street, my neighbor Louise lived alone after her husband died 3 years ago. Everyone had worried about her, but lately she seemed to be thriving. She'd joined a book club, taken up watercolor painting, even started dating a gentleman from her church. Louise had rebuilt her life on her own terms. Maybe it was time I did the same. I turned from the window, my decision forming with surprising clarity. I was done being an afterthought, a convenience. Done sacrificing my health and dignity for people who couldn't even see me as a human being worthy of basic respect. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, it filled me with a sense of calm purpose I hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow, I would call my doctor and be honest about my recovery, and then I would start making plans. Not for revenge or confrontation, I was too tired for that, but for something much more powerful, reclaiming my own life. My gaze fell on the family photo on my dresser, James, Sophia, and the kids at the lake last summer. I wasn't in it. I'd taken the picture. It was time to step back into frame, on my own terms. The waiting room at Dr. Morgan's office was quieter than usual that Tuesday morning. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, trying to ignore the persistent ache in my chest. Not just the physical pain from my surgery, but the deeper ache that had taken up residence since that family dinner 3 days ago. Deborah Winters? The nurse appeared at the doorway, clipboard in hand, her smile warm. Dr. Morgan will see you now. I followed her down the hallway, my steps measured and slow. The nurse, Patty, according to her name tag, noticed my careful movements. "Still having pain with walking?" she asked, slowing her pace to match mine. "A little," I admitted. "More than I expected, this many weeks out." Dr. Morgan was reviewing my chart when I entered the examination room. He looked up, his brow furrowing, slightly as he observed me easing myself onto the examination table. "How are we feeling today, Deborah?" he asked, setting the chart aside. For a moment, I almost gave my standard answer. "I'm fine." The words I'd been trained to say no matter. What was happening? The words that had allowed everyone around me to ignore my needs for years. But something stopped me. "Not great, actually," I said quietly. "The pain is worse than it was last week." Dr. Morgan's eyebrows shot up. In the 15 years he'd been my cardiologist, I'd never complained. Not when I was diagnosed with heart failure, not during the endless tests, not even when I woke up from open heart surgery. "Tell me about the pain," he said, pulling his stethoscope from around his neck. As he conducted his examination, I described the sharp, stabbing sensation that came with certain movements, the persistent ache behind my sternum, the fatigue that seemed to be getting worse, not better. "Have you been following the recovery protocol?" he asked, frowning as he listened to my heart. "No lifting, no exertion, rest periods throughout the day?" I hesitated. "I've been trying." He pulled back, fixing me with a stern look. "Deborah, trying isn't good enough at this stage. Your heart has been through a major trauma. It needs time to heal properly." "I know, but—" "No buts. I need you to be completely honest with me about what's been happening." Something in his direct gaze broke through the wall I'd carefully constructed. Before I could stop myself, the truth came tumbling out. About the family dinner. About cooking lasagna 3 weeks after open-heart surgery. About the years of being treated like a servant rather than a mother and grandmother. Dr. Morgan listened, without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finally fell silent, he sighed and sat down on the stool across from me. "Deborah, I'm going to be very blunt with you," he said. "What you're describing isn't just inconsiderate behavior from your family. It's actively dangerous to your recovery. I know, but they need— No." His voice was firm. "What you need right now is to heal. Your arterial grafts are still establishing blood flow. Your sternum is still knitting together. This isn't about being selfish or putting yourself first. It's about survival." The word hung in the air between us. Survival. Such a basic thing, yet somehow I'd been made to feel guilty for even considering it. "What would you tell a friend in your situation?" Dr. Morgan asked gently. I thought about it. I'd tell her to take care of herself, that she deserves better treatment. Exactly. So why is it different when it's you? I had no answer for that. Dr. Morgan wrote something on my chart. "I'm prescribing complete rest for the next 2 weeks. No cooking, no cleaning, no childcare. Nothing more strenuous than a short walk around the block, and even that needs to be approached carefully." He looked up at me. "Can you commit to that?" Thought about Sophia's inevitable calls asking for babysitting, about James's expectation that Sunday dinner would continue as always. I don't know if my family will understand." Dr. Morgan's expression hardened. "Then they can talk to me. This isn't a suggestion, Deborah. It's a medical necessity." He handed me a printed sheet. "I've written everything down. Show this to your family if you need to." But as I left the office, the paper tucked into my purse, I knew it wouldn't matter. A doctor's orders wouldn't change Sophia's expectations or James's complicity. They would find a way to make me feel guilty, to frame my health needs as an inconvenience. To them, unless I changed the equation entirely. The idea came to me as I drove home, so simple and clear that I nearly pulled over from the shock of it. I didn't have to be available. I didn't have to answer every call, respond to every demand. I didn't even have to be in my house when they arrived expecting dinner on Sunday. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. At home, I made a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table with a notepad. If I was going to do this, truly prioritize my health and recovery, I needed a plan. First, I needed somewhere to go. A hotel would be expensive, and I was on a fixed income. My brother Robert would take me in without question, but his apartment was small, and Sophia knew where he lived. Then I remembered Louise across the street and her sister's empty beach cottage. Louise had mentioned that her sister only used it in the summer and had been considering short-term rentals during the off-season. One phone call later, I had a place to stay for 2 weeks at a fraction of what a hotel would cost. Next, practical considerations. I wouldn't just disappear. That would be cruel and might result in unnecessary worry or even a police report. No, I would leave clear instructions. Prepared meals in the freezer with detailed heating instructions. A note explaining my absence. My cell phone on and with me, though I might be selective about which calls I answered. I looked down at my list, surprised at how methodical it was. How calm. This wasn't an emotional reaction. It was a carefully considered act of self-preservation. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I cooked simple meals that could be easily reheated and labeled each container with instructions even. James couldn't misinterpret. I packed a small suitcase with essentials, nothing that would be immediately noticed missing from my home. I wrote and rewrote the note I would leave on the door, trying to strike the right balance. Firm but not angry, clear but not confrontational. By evening, I was exhausted but satisfied. I had a plan. For once, I was putting my needs first. Not out of selfishness, but because no one else was going to do it for me. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a strange sense of peace despite the enormity of what I was about to do. For years, I had defined myself by what I could provide to others. Now I was choosing a different path. My heart seemed to beat more steadily at the thought. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through my bedroom curtains. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the familiar sounds of my home, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirping of birds in the backyard maple tree. This house had been my anchor for 30 years. The place where I'd raised James, where I'd rebuilt my life after Richard left, where I'd hosted countless family gatherings. Today, I was walking away from it all. Not forever. I wasn't dramatic enough for that kind of grand gesture. Just long. Enough to make my point. Long enough to heal, both physically and emotionally. I moved carefully through my morning routine, mindful of Dr. Morgan's warnings about overexertion. The pain in my chest was slightly better this morning, which I took as a good sign. My body was trying to heal. It was time I gave it the chance. Louise arrived at 9, as promised, her practical sedan idling quietly in my driveway. "Are you sure about this, Deborah?" she asked as she helped me carry my small suitcase to her car. "It's not too late to change your mind." I looked back at my house, at the garden I'd tended so carefully over the years, at the porch swing where I used to rock James to sleep on summer evenings. "I'm sure," I said quietly. "It's only for 2 weeks, and it's necessary." Louise nodded, understanding in her eyes. She'd been there the day after the disastrous family dinner, had seen the lasagna pan soaking in my sink, had noticed my labored breathing and the way I winced with each movement. She hadn't said anything then, but her silent support had meant everything. "The cottage is all set up," she said as we drove. "Sarah stocked the fridge and left some of her books. She remembered you like mysteries. The neighbor 2 doors down has the spare key if you need anything, and I'll check on you every few days." I felt a lump form in my throat at her kindness. When was the last time someone had considered what I might need or want? When was the last time I'd been the recipient of care rather than the provider of it? Thank you, I whispered, not trusting myself to say more. The beach cottage was perfect, small and cozy, with large windows overlooking the water. It was the off-season, so the beach was nearly deserted, just a few dog walkers in the distance. The quiet felt like a gift after years of constant availability. There's a landline if you need it, Louise explained, showing me around. Cell reception can be spotty, and I wrote down the address for the urgent care center just in case. I'll be fine, I assured her, though we both knew that wasn't a given, considering my recent surgery. After Louise left, I stood on the small deck, breathing in the salt air. I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. Lighter from the relief of stepping away. Heavier from the knowledge of what awaited me at the end of these 2 weeks. There would be anger, recriminations, guilt trips. But for now, for these precious days, I was free. Back at my house, the note I'd carefully crafted was taped to the front door, where James and Sophia couldn't miss it when they arrived for the expected Sunday dinner. Dear James, Sophia, and children, I'm taking some time away to focus on my recovery, as per my doctor's strict orders. I need complete rest for the next 2 weeks. There are prepared meals in the freezer with heating instructions on each container. Sunday's dinner is labeled and ready to be warmed at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. I love you all and will be in touch soon. Mom, Grandma Deborah. Simple. Direct. No accusations, no drama. I imagined them arriving, the children running ahead as usual, Sophia carrying whatever trendy dessert she'd picked up from the bakery near their house, James bringing up the rear with his perpetual distracted expression. I pictured their confusion upon finding the note, Sophia's irritation, James's furrowed brow. What would they do? Turn around and go home? Let themselves in and heat up the prepared meal? Call me in concern or anger? I didn't have to wait long to find out. At precisely 5:15 p.m., my phone began to ring. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, my heart pounding despite my resolve. The second call came 3 minutes later. James this time. Again, I let it ring through. Then, the text started. Mom, where are you? We're at the house. James. Deborah, this is extremely inconsiderate. We planned our entire day around this dinner. Sophia. Mom, are you okay? Should we be worried? James. The kids are hungry and disappointed. I hope you realize how selfish this is. Sophia. I read each message, noting with a detached sort of interest how quickly Sophia's tone escalated from annoyance to accusation. James, at least, showed some concern for my well-being, though it came second to his confusion over the disrupted routine. Not once did either of them mention my surgery or recovery. Not once did they acknowledge that perhaps I needed this time away. It was all about their inconvenience, their expectations, their disappointment. After about 20 minutes, the calls and texts slowed, then stopped. I imagined them going inside, finding the casserole in the freezer, following the heating instructions I'd left. Would they be grateful for my foresight? Or resentful that they had to handle this small task themselves? Just as the sun was setting, over the water, casting long golden reflections across the waves, my phone rang again. This time, it was Robert. Are you okay? He asked without preamble when I answered. James called me, frantic. Said you'd disappeared and left a cryptic note. I couldn't help but laugh at the characterization. I'm fine, Robert. And the note wasn't cryptic. It was quite clear. I'm taking some time to recover, as my doctor ordered. Where are you? Somewhere safe and quiet, I said, not ready to share my location even with him. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Robert was silent for a moment. Good for you, Debbie. he said finally. It's about damn time. You're not worried? About you? No. You're the most capable person I know. I'm more worried about James and those kids being able to fend for themselves without their personal chef and housekeeper. His bluntness made me wince, but he wasn't wrong. They'll manage. There's enough food in the freezer to feed an army. Of course you took care of that, Robert said, a smile in his voice. Heaven forbid they have to cook for themselves. After we hung up, I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat on the deck, watching the stars appear one by one above the darkening ocean. My phone buzzed with more messages, but I didn't look at them. Whatever crisis my absence had created, it wasn't mine to solve. Not tonight. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I had nowhere to be, no one to care for, nothing to prepare. Just myself, the sound of waves on the shore, and the vast, star-filled sky above. I took a deep, careful breath, feeling the salt air fill my lungs. My chest still ached, but it was a clean pain now. The pain of healing, not the pain of being, constantly torn open by careless words and thoughtless demands. This, I realized, was what freedom felt like. Not the absence of responsibility, but the presence of choice. I had chosen this solitude, this peace, and no matter what happened when I returned home in 2 weeks, no one could take this moment away from me. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and smiled into the darkness. Let them figure it out for themselves. I had my own healing to focus on. The first 3 days of my self-imposed retreat passed in a kind of blissful haze. I slept more deeply than I had in years, lulled by the rhythmic sound of waves against the shore. I read the mystery novels Louise's sister had left, losing myself in stories where problems were solved neatly by the final chapter. I sat on the deck for hours, watching seagulls wheel and dive, feeling the tension gradually seep from my body. On the 4th day, reality intruded. My phone, which I'd been checking only once a day, exploded with notifications when I turned it on after breakfast. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, 5 voicemails. Most were from James and Sophia, their tone evolving from irritation to anger to a kind of desperate bewilderment. The latest, sent just an hour ago, made my hands tremble slightly as I read it. Mom, this has gone on long enough. We're genuinely worried about you. If you don't respond today, I'm filing a missing person report. James, I stared at the screen, a complex mixture of emotions washing over me. Part of me was touched that he was worried. Another part was indignant. I'd clearly stated in my note that I was taking time to recover. I wasn't missing. I was deliberately absent. But the largest part of me was simply tired. Tired of being the only one who considered others' feelings. Tired of being taken for granted. Tired of the constant one-sided giving. With a sigh, I typed out a response. James, I am fine. As I said in my note, I'm taking 2 weeks to rest and recover, as per doctor's orders. I will be home on Sunday the 22nd. There is no need for concern or for a missing person report, Mom. I hesitated, then added, P.S. How was the casserole? His response came almost immediately. Where are you? We've been worried sick. This isn't like you. I smiled wryly at that. What did he mean by, this isn't like you? That standing up for myself wasn't like me? That prioritizing my health wasn't like me? He was right, of course. It wasn't like the me I'd been for the past decade. But perhaps it was like the me I used to be, before I'd allowed myself to be diminished. I'm somewhere, safe, focusing on my recovery. I'll be home in 10 days. Please respect my need for this time. Mom. I set the phone down, knowing it would ring again soon. Sure enough, barely a minute passed before James's name flashed on the screen. This time, I answered, Mom. Where are you? His voice was a mixture of relief and lingering panic. I told you, James. I'm somewhere safe, recovering. But why did you just leave like that? Why didn't you tell us you were going? I took a deep breath, mindful of the tightness in my chest. I did tell you. I left a very clear note. A note. He sounded indignant now. You've never done anything like this before. Sophia was beside herself. The kids were confused. We thought something terrible had happened to you, despite the note explicitly stating I was taking time to recover. I kept my voice calm, though my pulse had quickened. Well, yes, but it's not like you to just disappear. It's not like me to have triple bypass surgery either, James. Yet here we are. A lengthy silence followed. When James spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge. Are you okay? Really? I'm getting better, I said honestly. The rest is helping. My chest doesn't hurt as much. That's good. He sounded genuinely relieved, which softened something in me. But Mom, we need you. Sunday dinners are tradition. And Sophia has that charity event next weekend. We were counting on you to watch the kids. And just like that, the softness hardened again. Not, we miss you, or we're sorry for how we treated you. Just, we need you for the practical functions I provided. I won't be back until the 22nd, James. You'll need to make other arrangements. But Mom, no, James. I surprised myself with the firmness in my voice. I've given you clear boundaries. I expect you to respect them. Another silence, this one tense with his unspoken surprise. I had never spoken to him this way before. Fine, he said finally, his tone clipped. Call if you need anything. The irony of his offer wasn't lost on me. When had he last asked if I needed anything? Goodbye, James. Give my love to the children. I ended the call before he could respond, my hands shaking slightly. Standing up to my son shouldn't have been an act of courage, but it was. For years, I'd been so afraid of losing what little connection we had that I'd accepted scraps of attention, of affection. I'd allowed myself to be used rather than risk being discarded. No more. The next call came from Sophia, less than an hour later. I let it go to voicemail, not yet ready for her particular brand of manipulation. Her message was exactly what I expected, a masterful blend of guilt, accusation, and thinly veiled threats. Deborah, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's extremely selfish. James is worried sick. The children keep asking for you. And I had to cancel my hair appointment to stay home with them because you weren't there to babysit. Call us back immediately. I deleted the message without responding. Robert called that evening, his tone considerably warmer than the others. So, James finally reached you, he said when I answered. He called me in a state earlier. Said you refused to come home. I'm taking the full 2 weeks my doctor prescribed, I confirmed. Good for you. How are they handling it? I sighed, settling into the comfortable chair by the window. About as well as you'd expect. James is confused. Sophia is furious. They can't seem to grasp that I might have needs of my own. Robert chuckled. You've trained them too well, Debbie. Always available, always accommodating. This is probably the first time you've ever said no to them. His words stung with their accuracy. I didn't realize how one-sided things had become, I admitted. Or maybe I did, but I didn't want to face it. And now? I gazed out at the darkening sky, at the first stars appearing above the water. Now I know I can't go back to the way things were. I won't. That's my sister, Robert said, approval clear in his voice. What will you do when you go home? It was the question I'd been avoiding, the reality waiting at the end of my temporary escape. I'm not sure yet, but I know things will be different. Over the next few days, the calls and messages continued. James's tone gradually shifted from confusion to resignation. Sophia's remained sharp with accusation. My granddaughter Emma sent a sweet text asking if I was okay and when I would be back, which brought tears to my eyes. I responded to her immediately, assuring her I was fine and would see her soon. The most surprising message came a week after my departure, from James's colleague Michael, whom I'd met at various company functions over the years. "Deborah, I hope. You don't mind me reaching out. James mentioned you were away recovering. The office took up a collection for a fruit basket, but realized we don't have your current address. Could you let me know where to send it? We're all thinking of you." Michael, I stared at the message, a lump forming in my throat. My son's co-workers, people who barely knew me, had shown more consideration for my recovery than my own family. Something fundamental had shifted during my time away, and it wasn't just my perspective. The world had continued turning without me, at the center of my family's needs. They had managed, perhaps not smoothly, perhaps not happily, but they had managed. And I had discovered that I could exist for myself, not merely as an extension of their requirements. When I finally responded to Michael, it was with my home address and a note that the basket could be delivered there on the 22nd, when I returned. I was done hiding, done running. I was ready to face whatever came next. 6 months can change everything or nothing at all. In my case, it was somewhere in between. I returned home on the exact date I'd promised, Sunday the 22nd. The house was quiet, undisturbed. No one waiting, no one watching for my arrival. I hadn't told them exactly when I'd be back, just the day. The fruit basket from James's colleagues sat on the front porch, a cheerful note attached wishing me a speedy recovery. I brought it inside, touched by the gesture from relative strangers. As I moved through the rooms, I was struck by how unchanged everything was. The same furniture, the same photographs, the same view from the kitchen window. Yet I was different. 2 weeks of solitude and reflection had shifted something fundamental within me. When my phone rang at 4:30 p.m., I wasn't surprised to see James's number. "We're on our way," he said without preamble when I answered. "Should be there in about 20 minutes. No. Are you home? No. How are you feeling?" Just the assumption that I would be there, waiting, Sunday dinner ready as always. "I won't be cooking today, James," I said calmly. "I only got home a few hours ago." A pause. "Oh, well, we can pick up something on the way. Do you need anything?" The question, so belatedly offered, almost made me laugh. "No, thank you. I have everything I need." When they arrived, Sophia was the first through the door, her expression a carefully composed mask of concern. "Deborah, you had us so worried," she said, leaning in for an air kiss beside my cheek. "You look rested." The slight hesitation told me everything. She'd expected to find me diminished somehow, weakened by my time away. Instead, I stood straight-backed and clear-eyed, no longer the fading woman who had left 2 weeks earlier. James, followed with the children, Emma rushing forward to hug me with genuine affection. "Grandma, we missed you." "I missed you too, sweetheart," I said, returning her embrace carefully, mindful of my healing chest. Tyler hung back, uncertain, until I opened my arms to him as well. "Did you bring us anything?" he asked as he hugged me, the innocent selfishness of childhood. "Not this time," I replied, "but I'm glad to see you." James set a bag of takeout containers on the kitchen counter. "We brought dinner," he said, his tone cautious, as if uncertain of his reception. "Chinese from that place you like." "Thank you." I smiled, genuinely appreciative of the gesture, small as it was. "Let's eat in the dining room." As we settled around the table, I could feel their eyes on me, assessing, wondering. What had changed? What would be different now? "So?" Sophia began, her tone falsely bright. "Are you fully recovered now? Back to normal?" I took a sip of water, considering my response. My recovery is progressing well, but it's a long process. The cardiologist says it will be 6 months to a year before I'm completely healed. A year? Sophia's dismay was palpable. But you'll be able to watch the children next weekend, won't you? I have that charity luncheon, and the sitter canceled. James shot her a warning look, but it was too late. The request, or rather the assumption, had been made. I'm afraid not, I said, my voice gentle but firm. My doctor has restricted my activities. No childcare until I'm further along in my recovery. Sophia's mouth tightened. But no exceptions, I cut in, still smiling. Doctor's orders. A tense silence fell, broken only by the children's oblivious chatter about school and friends. I ate my food calmly, no longer anxious about the disapproval radiating from my daughter-in-law. We missed your cooking, Mom, James said finally, an olive branch extended in the midst of the tension. The freezer meals were good, but not the same. I nodded, acknowledging the compliment without rushing to fill the silence that followed. Once I would have immediately offered to cook their favorites next weekend, to come over and prepare meals for their freezer, to do anything to smooth over the awkwardness. Not anymore. How was the beach? Emma asked, surprising me with her perception. Daddy said you were staying near the ocean. It was beautiful, I told her. Peaceful. I watched the sunrise every morning. Can we go sometime? Tyler piped up, momentarily looking up from his sweet and sour chicken. I'd like that, I said, smiling at him. Maybe when the weather gets warmer. Sophia's expression darkened, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. I could read her thoughts clearly. Plans were being made without her approval, connections forming that bypassed her careful control. After dinner, as James helped the children clear the table, a task they had never done before in my home, he asked the question I'd been waiting for. So what now, Mom? Are you back for good? I met his gaze steadily. I never left for good, James. I just took the time I needed to heal. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But things will be different going forward. He frowned slightly. Different how? I'll no longer be available for last-minute babysitting or regular childcare duties. Sunday dinners will happen once a month. Not weekly, and I won't always be the one cooking. I kept my tone matter-of-fact, not apologetic. I'm going to focus on my recovery and on building a life that doesn't revolve entirely around being of service to others. James looked stunned, as if I'd announced I was moving to another country. But Mom, we rely on you. I know you do. Too much, as it turns out. It's not healthy for any of us. Sophia had appeared in the doorway, listening with narrowed eyes. This is about that ridiculous comment I made, isn't it? About the cooking? I was stressed, Deborah. You're taking it too personally. I shook my head. This isn't about any one incident, Sophia. It's about patterns that have developed over years. Patterns I've allowed and participated in. I'm simply changing my part in them. So you're abandoning your family, she said flatly. No, I replied, my voice steady. I'm taking care of myself so that I can be present for my family in sustainable ways. There's a difference. The evening ended awkwardly, with promises to talk more later. As they left, James lingered behind, something uncertain in his expression. Mom? He started, then stopped. I'm glad you're okay. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. A recognition, however small, that my well-being mattered. Thank you, James, I said softly. I am too. In the months that followed, the new boundaries I'd established were tested repeatedly. Sophia's emergencies that required my immediate assistance. James's complaints about the reduced Sunday dinners. Even the children's bewilderment at my newfound unavailability. But I held firm. I joined a book club that met on Wednesday evenings, previously my standing date to babysit while James and Sophia had their date night. I took a watercolor class on Saturday mornings, I reconnected with old friends who had fallen by the wayside, as my family's demands had consumed more and more of my time. Most importantly, I stopped explaining my decisions. No became a complete sentence, not the beginning of a negotiation. It wasn't easy. There were tears, mostly mine, in private, arguments, mostly with Sophia, and moments of doubt, late at night when I wondered if I was being selfish after all. But my health improved dramatically once I stopped overextending myself. Dr. Morgan noted it at every checkup, his approval reinforcing my resolve. Surprisingly, my relationship with James began to heal as well, once he adjusted to the new reality. Without the constant backdrop of my availability, he seemed to value our time together more. We started having lunch, just the two of us, every other week, something we hadn't done in years. During one such lunch, 6 months after my disappearance, he finally broached the subject we'd been dancing around. "I didn't realize how much we took you for granted," he said quietly, studying his coffee cup. "Until you weren't there." I waited, giving him space to continue. "Sophia and we've been having some issues." He looked up, his expression troubled. "She expects a lot. From everyone. I didn't see it until I had to deal with everything you used to handle." "I enabled it," I acknowledged. "For a long time." He nodded slowly. "We're in counseling now. It's helping, I think." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm glad, James. I miss how things were before," he admitted. "The weekly dinners, you always being there for the kids." "I miss some of it too," I said honestly. "But I don't miss feeling invisible. I don't miss putting everyone else's needs before my own health." He winced slightly but nodded. "I understand. I'm trying to." It wasn't perfect. Sophia still treated me with cool disdain at family gatherings. The children still sometimes complained that I wasn't as fun as before. There were still moments when I doubted my choices, when the pull of old patterns felt almost irresistible. But then I would look at my calendar, filled now with my own appointments, my own interests, my own life, and I would remember that beach cottage and the woman who had found her voice there. The woman who had finally realized that taking care of herself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. 6 months after my heart surgery, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. And that made all the difference. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.